I think so. I see the, yeah.
Postman. Postman. I guess like let's maybe start by what does Postman let you do in what you have done so far. I think
Could you
what
repeat
is
what you say? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you because my internet is unstable.
oh yeah. So I was asking like how would you describe Postman? But I decided to let's instead talk about what does Postman let you do as a developer.
Test your
Mm-hmm.
your data.
A little bit more about that.
Test maybe the endpoint. What's the value we're gonna get as an object?
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I will say to this, I'll add either API or backend here.
Mm.
Test API and Pons. Mm-hmm. And then I guess let's talk about how does Postman do this? How does it let you test API endpoints?
By sending either the correct parameters or body to the endpoint, and then receiving and parsing any data that's returned.
Mm-hmm. So just to that, I would add, I would say by sending HTTP requests, HTTP requests with data. Let's say with data, which can be what you mentioned, params, body data. The URL in itself could be considered a part of the data, etc. Okay. So yeah, this is pretty much it. Like Postman lets you test API endpoints by sending HTTP requests with data. So Postman, so Douglas, you mentioned a server. So we usually have a server. Usually have the server, right? And we have the browser or the front end. Let's say front end. And then the front end communicates with the server, and the server communicates with the front end in the through HTTP requests, right? The front end makes a request to the server processes that request, and then produces a response, gives it back. Also, another word we use for this is client, right? Mm-hmm. And so, in more general terms, Postman can do the same as the front end. Well, I mean, I guess Postman doesn't show you front end application, but Postman is a client in this relationship. So Postman can send data to the server and receive data back as well. So we say, in a simple definition could be Postman is an HTTP client. What that means is that it's the client in a client-server relationships. And by saying it's an HTTP client means it understands the HTTP protocol, which means it knows how to make network requests. It knows how to make HTTP requests. It knows the methods. It knows the structure of an HTTP request. It understands sort of that protocol. So we can just say Postman is an HTTP client. I think if we go to the Postman official documentation, Postman it has grown from just the client, and now they say they're a collaboration platform for API development because they have a bunch of other stuff in. I think if we go to API client, So Postman, an API client, that's the same. API backend server. Here we could almost interchangeably change this word by or use this API with server, with backend, etc. And it's a client. So yes, send request, inspect the response, and easily debug, basically. Okay, and you're more or less familiar with it. I think the stuff that I put in that README was mainly stuff that I had discovered on my own, and then I read the documentation. And then I actually read, like, I found a resource that I linked at the end, which is actually had a lot of what I was writing here. So at some point I was just thinking, oh, I should have just used that instead of writing this new thing. But this is a cool. It goes into a bit some other things that I'm not going to go into, but it's still helpful. Postman tutorial. It's all the way at the end. Okay, so Postman, an API client, an API, a backend client, server client, etc. It's just a program that let us make HTTP requests to test our data, or to test our backends mainly, and see what we get back. You could use it as probably, Douglas, you use it for coding challenge, I think you mentioned. So you're probably using, I'm not sure if that was a third-party API or something that you didn't build. Is that correct?
It was a third party. They provided the API. You had to make a request to it to get the data back, that you then needed to manipulate and then send to a different, like you had to get information from one API and then post altered information to a different API.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that's to say that Postman is not only something we could use for backend development. If we're a front-end developer and want to use third-party APIs, we can still use Postman to interact with those third-party services and understand them and test them. Probably even before you commit to actually code something up with that API to see if it meets all your needs. The cool thing about Postman is that it let us control the whole HTTP request. Like, it gives us full control over what we put in the HTTP request. For the most part, things that we change are the HTTP methods to use. So we use get, post, or patch, and so on. Request bodies is another common thing that we control, but it will also let us control headers if we want to or if we need to, and parameters. And here's a link for download it, but I think most of you already have it. Okay. Also, once you have it downloaded, I suggest you log in or create an account with it, because that lets you sync up your requests or back them up. And it happens, for example, I changed laptops at the beginning of the year. Pursuit gave me a new laptop, and I didn't have to worry about backing up my Postman request. I have, I'll show you in a moment, but I have different collections for projects that I have built, for labs that I did for you, and I didn't have to worry about backing those up because they were already backed up for me. And then when I moved to the new computer, I just install, I log in with my Postman account, and then they are there. So let me see. We can come back to this. Let me open Postman. Let me show you what I mean. So all this stuff here on the right, let me add a bit of zoom. All this stuff here on the right are collections that I have created over maybe 2 years. And they just have requests that I have created there. And all that was backed up by Postman. So let me see. You can, if you click on this like planet symbol here, it looks like Jupiter or Saturn. You can see if you're logged in there. If you're not logged in, And let's see what happens if I'm not logged in. Oh yeah, if I'm not logged in, then when I open up, I get to this screen. Here you could like, what I recommend if you don't have an account yet is just, once you have it installed, sign in with Google and use your Pursuit account. That will be enough. You could also like click here to skip sign in and take me straight to the app. But then this doesn't have the syncing enable. So if I do something here and I want to save my work, I'll need to log in. Let me log back in. Sign in. No, what does it move it? Sign in with Google. And you can see that my requests then start appearing here because they're syncing back. Collections, now my data is back. Okay, cool. So that is Postman. So let's take a look at what we will do here. Actually, I think I may have to remove that collection. Yes, let me delete this because this is what I had done yesterday. And we're gonna do that from scratch. Okay, so to create a request, we can just click here to add a new tab. And then here we'll put the URL of the API that we're going to use. I did it so that I show an example and then you go and do an exercise of the example that I showed. So I'll ask you to follow along. So I'm going to be using this HTTP bin API. I discovered it actually yesterday as I was putting this together. And it's a very, it doesn't do anything really, this API, but it lets you try out different methods and different endpoints, and it returns back information that you sent it, but it doesn't really save anything. It doesn't persist anything. The endpoint that we're going to use is the purpose of this API is for learning purposes. Somebody created for learning purposes to try out different methods, to learn about status codes and stuff like that. I'm going to use, I guess like there are some that return different images. I didn't see that one, but we're going to use this one, anything. So /anything on this API, we can send it with anything, literally, and then it will just return back what we sent. And that for our purposes, that will be enough. But imagine this could be like your own API. So what I'm going to do is, so they say the root endpoint is, where is the root endpoint? I think this is kind of small, but this is the root endpoint. So I'm just going to copy that into my Postman. And also, I should put HTTPS / I don't think it's necessary, but I'd like to have it there. And then I'm just going to say /anything. And then if I send a request, then I get back some data of anything I sent. So these are the headers that I had sent. It says there is no data, there is no arguments, there is no files. I did not send any form. I did not send any JSON. The method was a get. This is actually the origin. This is my IP address at my home, which I think it would be great to have exposed in the internet now that I'm thinking about it, but here we are. And then URL just shows the URL the request was made at. So this one, it just got us anything that we had sent. So what I'm gonna do here, actually, let me stop there. Any questions or thoughts up until this point? Anything that maybe you have in mind?
Sorry. Yeah. So we can use anything in our projects, or is it just with this API?
So you wouldn't use anything in your projects because, or you wouldn't use this API in your projects because it doesn't save the data. It doesn't persist it. It doesn't. This API was made for illustrative purposes, And I'm just using it here for demonstration purposes rather than anything else. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, okay, gotcha. Okay.
And the base is just that this is an API that it sort of echoes back whatever you sent it. Yeah, and that's not a very useful thing for an app. Yeah. Okay, so then sending a request, I usually send them with command plus enter. So I don't have to go on and hit the send button, but that's the same thing. So you're probably familiar with this menu here where you can put parameters. Let's say, I don't know, let's say we can make up this stuff. Let's say we have a parameter called search. Let's say I'm searching for cats. So these are query parameters. So that means they appear in the URL. That's why we got this part here. And I could say, I don't know, let's say there is a limit. And I say I want to get 10 cats. Again, this is just for illustration purposes. And then if I send that, the request is exactly the same. The response is exactly the same. But now the API is returning with the arguments that I sent. Oh, I guess I didn't notice that. They call them arguments here, but we call them parameters here. But it's still the same thing. And we see that we got our data back, the data that we sent. Now, I guess just in a formatted way, JSON, in a JSON way, which is nice. But we got everything that we sent, basically. The point is that this API returns what we sent it back to us in a JSON format, and stuff like that. Okay, so what I actually want to do is I want to send the post request to /anything, and I'm going to make this up. Let's say we had an auth endpoint /login. And let's say I was going to send a post request to log in a user. So, okay, here's a question. How do we send data to the server that we don't want to appear in the URL? Like, we wouldn't want this. We wouldn't want username, user 123, and password. Hello 123. We wouldn't want this here because, well, is like the information is right here exposed in the URL. Anything that will send, anything that could be logging the URL will be able to see that information. So where will we send this information?
To the body.
To the body, that's correct. So let's go to the body. Also, let's see. Yeah. Let me show you here something where let's say I'm still sending it in the URL. The first point is that I wanted to show you and talk to you about is the fact that you can inspect the request raw. And to do so, you can just go here to this code button on the right. If I click on that, then curl gives me pre-made scripts for how to make this request with curl if I wanted to try it in the terminal. So if I copy this and I paste it in terminal, then it will make the same request, but now this time with curl. I actually discovered yesterday that it even has some pre-made for Axios. So if I want to repeat this request in Axios, I can just copy this code, and this is how we will send it. And it is using that catch instead of async await, but the idea is the same. But what I wanted to show you are these are pre-made scripts. But if we wanted to see it raw, like the way that it will actually go out is if we click on HTTP. This is the entire request. When your computer sends the request out, this is what it's sending. It's just this text. And the first line has the method, It has the endpoint and the query parameters. It also has what HTTP version is going to use, 1.1, and it has the host, which is where the endpoint is found. So it's going to use that and then search for anything of logging to be sent to. But this is the raw request, right? So this is a post request. We are not sending any data with it. If we want to send confidential information, we want to use the body and not the params for that. So I'm going to remove this from here. Oops. Remove this from this X. So we don't have any params. And I go to body. And I'm going to do this actually a bit differently, and you will do it the other way. So I want to send this information as JSON. And to send information as JSON, I'm going to go here to raw because I want to send raw information. And I'm going to select here JSON. And then here now I can write JSON here. And then I'm going to write some valid JSON, say username, user, what is my English going on today? Let's say some user 123 and password. Hello 123. So now the information is not going to appear in the URL, which is good. Now I'm going to send this information. So as I send that, we see that the server reply with no args, some data, and this looks like our data. And if we keep going, we also got JSON, so we got the same data now in JSON. This is because the API detected that I sent this in JSON. It was a post request, etc. Now, if I go to code to inspect what this looks like raw, this is what I get. So there's a bit more information. Now, what are some of the things that you notice that maybe were not in the previous one? Anyone remembers anything?
Well, there's the JSON at the end now. Content type as well as content length, I think, are also new.
That's exactly right. Yep. Those are new. Everything else is the same. I guess we removed the query parameters, but everything else is the same. We do have these two new headers, as Douglas shared, and we have the body here. This is part of the HTTP format. This is again the raw request. Is that the body will always be separated from the headers by an empty line. That is just the way that the people that wrote the specification for HTTP decided. The body should be separated from the headers by a new line, by an empty line. And this is it. This is what is actually being sent to the server. And then the server is some magic that we don't think too much about it, but the server looks at this first. It looks at the content type to see, oh, what kind of data did this client send to me? And then if it's application JSON, which our Express applications by default already do with JSON parser, which are some lines in app.js that some of you have put some thought on. Your server reads this line and says, "Oh, okay, so the body, what is after that empty line must be JSON. I'm going to try to convert that to JSON and see if that works." And then it just parses this information so that we get a JavaScript object in the server that we can use. Okay, so this is it on this side, just being able to inspect the request raw and looking at it. So you might not have used raw here before, raw on JSON. Most commonly we use X form URL encoded. And here's the exercise. So the exercise is If I go back here, oh, I also forgot. Oops. I also forgot that I did want a param. I wanted a role admin param. Let me add that here. So I'm gonna go back to params and I'm gonna say role admin. The only thing that changes is that now we have args here with role as and admin as the value, but I just wanted to have a little bit more there. So if I inspect in code, now I see the same thing. The content length only appears. Oh, I guess I should have said also that 61 is the number of characters that are here, including new lines. So if we counted it and then including these spaces as well, if we counted that, that will give you 61. That is just calculated automatically by the client before he sends it. That's the content length. Yeah, and then we see the query parameter here for illustration purposes. So then the server replied with that information. So the exercise that I want you to do is this. So I sent my request with these criteria. So a post method to this URL with these params, body type was raw and JSON. And then the body data that I'm sending is just the JSON. And then we inspected the request. We saw that. And now your turn is, what I want you to do is fire up Postman if you haven't already. Send a patch request to this URL. I can paste this in the chat. If I can find the chat. The chat should have a shortcut. So make a patch request to this URL. The body type now is not raw. The body type now is the one we're more familiar with, which is XWW form URL encoded. You can include any params that you want. And then in the body, fill out these two pieces of information. Email with user email.com and profile picture with this URL. Imagining this was an endpoint to update the information about a user. I'm going to copy that here so you have it. So is that clear?
So,
Yeah.
like if you scroll up a little bit, up a little more, right there. So you see how the first example, the body type was raw, and then we select the JSON. For the one that we have to do we select the XWW form include URL encoded and then select JSON?
Oh, we don't select JSON. We just go here, X form URL encoded, and then you fill out the information here.
Cool. Okay, got it.
Cool. And then send the request, and I want you to inspect the code after that, and we'll talk about what you get.
And how do we inspect again?
Yeah, the Zoom windows get in the way. You click on this button here, code, right below the save button. And then here you make sure you have HTTP.
Oh, I see it. Okay. Gotcha.
Let me give 5 minutes for that and give me a thumbs up once you have sent it. Yeah, let me just give you the time. start recording again. Okay, so give me a thumbs up if what you got when you inspect it looks like this. Okay, I see Douglas join, and I think Ashiel probably got the same thing. Sihan, do you get the same thing?
I didn't get the content length. I only got content type.
Oh,
Yeah, the
Yeah,
same
same
here.
here.
Same here.
that is interesting. Okay, but I think I didn't hear Sihan. How did it go for you?
Yeah, I didn't get the content length.
But you get everything the same, but the content line.
Yes.
That is interesting. I truly don't know why that could be. Let's replicate it here. So I'm gonna. Oh, also, I don't know if you changed it to patch. I asked it
Oh,
you to change it to patch.
What's that?
Um,
let me fix
That might have been it.
but that actually shouldn't be it. but maybe. Let me copy this URL, paste it here. Params, I'm gonna say maybe active, false, just to have something that not necessary. And then I'm gonna go to, oh, I guess actually, let me ask you this. How many of you create a new request for that? Or do you just change the post request?
I just changed the post request.
Okay. Douglas, what do you do?
This is my first time sending anything, so I'm new on my computer.
I see. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. That's fine. That's fine. I will just ask you to have one for the post request, and one for the patch request. Cool. The post request, I send it with this criteria here. So let me. I think I can share this on the chat. Cool. Oh, nice. I think I see the Zoom chat updated. Now code looks a bit better. So give me a thumbs up once you have both the post and the patch request.
Oh, that won't do. Okay, I've done mine. It also does not have the content length.
Huh. That's weird. So the post doesn't have content length either.
Yeah.
Oh, I think is maybe try to send it first and then inspect.
I did.
So-
And yeah, no, I did do a send. I've got it. It gets a body back.
Huh. That is so interesting. I'm starting to think maybe is the version of Postman.
That might be it. I haven't updated. I probably need an update on mine.
I have version 7.36. If you go to the Postman menu.
7.3.3.1. Yeah, I gotta
How do
pull
we
this up to date.
have the updated one?
I think if you go to Postman and then the second menu says check for updates.
Okay.
But
Should take just a second.
yeah, that's weird. So weird that you're not, and it's all of you. It's not just one. Because the content type gets measured at the time of sending it, not before. But let me know once you have updated, see if that made any change.
Yeah, I'm waiting for mine to finish updating now.
Okay. Us in React and in JavaScript, we use JSON for everything nowadays. But this will be, if you have a form, for example, if you have a form and you don't have any JavaScript, which you could still have, the form will still work and you could still send the form, and that information will be sent in this format, in form URL encoded. That looks like this. It just looks like a key, an equal, and then the value connected by ampersands with the key, equal, and then the value, and so on. But I wanted to show you that just to be aware that when you send information, oh, actually, maybe form data is the other one that I was talking about earlier. But the important part is that depending on what type of body you pick, the information gets sent in that format. And because it just happens to be that our Express servers understand these two very well, understand URL encoded and JSON by default. Like those are lines that sort of come with boilerplate. We don't think about how the information is actually being sent, because our backends, we usually send form URL encoded, and then when we console log reg that body on the backend, for example, we just see that as JSON. It looks like JSON there. But what's actually going on is that the information is being sent in this format. Then in your backend, you have something called a body parser. And at some point you say body parser.url encoded. What that enables your backend to do is to understand this format and parse it and create JavaScript, create JSON from it, and so on. And similarly, we have a middleware. This is our middleware body parser URL encoded, and we have some other middleware set to understand JSON, which is the format in which this is being sent. And we actually see the JSON there. Cool. Questions or thoughts on inspecting the request?
So the difference between the two would be like how would be whether or not how you'd want to wait, how I'm trying to word this sentence right. The difference between the two would be whether how you return the JSON. So for example, like using the raw, it returns in an object, but using the URL encoded, it returns in like a line.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. It goes. So it does. It's not the return, or like is gonna be sent in JSON if I'm using raw JSON, and
Okay.
it's gonna be sent in. It's gonna be sent encoded in the URL. Well, in the form URL encoded format, which is, oh, where did it go? Oh, so, I guess that's the patch. It will go, yes, it will go in this one line. So the difference is the format in which it's sent to the server. But that the server could still understand both if we so set it, which we have in our cases. There are servers that maybe don't like form URL encoded. Oh, let's see. I think there might be one here in this API. Response inspection, response formats, maybe. Yeah. So it returns a simple JSON document. That one will return JSON. This one will return HTML, but all of these are GET. Yeah, no. So dynamic. Oh, these are interesting. There's some that I didn't check, but yes, the main difference is just the format in which is going to be sent here. Cool. So the reason why I wanted to show you how to inspect it raw is because sometimes you might be sending a request, and this actually happened with a peer of yours. You might be sending the request, and what you're getting back is an error or something that you're not expecting. If you inspect the code here, you're going to see exactly what you're sending, and then you can look for anything that might be weird. Like a common example is having duplicate headers. If you have duplicate content type, then the server is going to get confused about which one to pay attention to. I think Ashia has a hand raised.
Yeah. So, question on the params. So basically, what's the difference between using the params and then putting the arguments in params versus putting the arguments in body?
Okay. So what's the difference from putting data in the parameters or in the body?
Yeah.
So if we look at this, so this is our body, right? This JSON, and we have some params here. Role admin. Let's add one more. Let's say limit 10, 12. So the difference is if I go inspect it in code, the difference is that the params go in the URL. So the params role and limit are in the URL here. The body goes up in its own spot at the bottom of the request. Why you may want one or the other is we use the body to keep confidential information because the body will never be logged to any login service. And the URL for anything that can be public and might be logged when the request is processed.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So maybe like in the URL, the params could be like maybe like user videos, and then limit a number, and then the body would be the actual videos of the user, right?
Yeah. So also you brought a good point there, which is like the reasons or why we put something in the params and why we'll put something in the body, which I didn't talk about. You will put what you put in the params. These are generally filters. So you can think of it like when you filter information, right? The body is used, and so actually query params are actually not very common in post or patch requests because they are mostly used for filtering out information. So it might be a get request to get all users, but you only want to get 12. So you will use that in the query parameters.
Okay.
Right. So query parameters are mostly used for filtering functionality. The body is used to send information to the backend, to post it, to save it. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Cool. I guess like the example that I was trying to go with here was like, if we only have like admin, this is me imagining maybe there is a system where you log in, but you could log in as an admin, or you could log in as a regular user, or you could log in as a teacher, or you log in as an instructor, as a student, for example. But it still feels a bit contrived. Maybe that will be something like that goes like admin instead. Yeah, admin. Maybe that will be like, if it's an admin, then login like that. If it's a student, login like that. But this is, imagine if this was our API, we could implement it in whatever way we want. Yeah. Okay, just one more time. Query parameters are mostly used for filtering or searching information. I should also have mentioned that. When you're searching or you're filtering information in some way, the body you use when you're sending information to the server, for the server to do something with it, or for the server to save it to a database. And just know that any confidential information you don't ever want to put in the params, because that's going to be visible. You want to put it in the body. Cool. Other questions or thoughts here? Okay, so we have 2 requests. Anytime I make a new request, I actually create a new request for that. I don't update this because I want to, like, you can see, for example, this is one of my side projects that I call production, and you can see all the requests that I have. Sign up a new user, sign up a duplicate user, try to sign up a duplicate user to see if my API responds with the right information. So I have one, basically for every endpoint, I have one request, because I don't want to go around changing stuff in the URL. I just want to be able to run it and see what I got back. So the next step is how to create these sort of folders, which are known as collections. So to create a collection, there's a few different ways, but you can just go here to the new option, and then here you get the collections button. So I'm going to click on collection, and I'm going to give my collection a name. A collection is just a place where we can group requests together, and it would not only help you with organizing your request, it could also help you with testing. For example, you can run all your requests in a collection sequentially, so that I try like different flows in my backend, and I create a collection for each one of those. It also helps for variables, which we're gonna get in a minute, to share information across requests that are part of the same collection. So for now, just a collection is a place. Oh, also it's a place to group requests. Another thing that a collection will let you do is to share requests. So if I'm working with my team on a backend and we want us to be on the same page about what requests we have and what requests we're trying out, having them in a collection, you could just share the collection. And then other people in the team will be able to either download it and import into Postman, or even there's a few ways in which it can be shared. Even click a link and then open in Postman, and they're going to be seeing the same request that you have. So here I'm just going to create my collection. I'm going to give it the name of the API that I'm dealing with, which is HTTP bin. And I'm just going to hit create. once you hit create, we see that there is 0 requests in that collection. The next step is to add requests to it. So I'm going to close this. And then I can just, to save this 2 requests to that collection, you can see that there's this orange dot, right? That's just like in VS Code, when you get a dot, that means you have unsaved changes. That means if I quit Postman, then those, I'm gonna lose those. But I can just go here to save. And then here I can give my request a name. Generally, I just leave the URL or add something to the end here, like login user or something like that. But if you leave it only with the name, with the URL, that's also fine. And then here, you probably don't have any collections, but I'm just gonna search for my HTTP bin collection. And then now this will save my request to the HTTP bin collection. So if I click on save, now that request became part of my collection. So let me save the other one. I'm gonna click on save. The name, I'm gonna just leave it like that, and make sure I have HTTP bin selected here, which I already have by default as I save a second request. Wait, is this? Yeah, this is a patch, so I'm gonna save this and to the HTTP bin, save to HTTP bin, and now I have them here. Cool. Okay, now you go create the collection and add them to it. Give me a thumbs up once you have the collection, the request inside of the collection.
I finally launched my update, so it's going to take me a hot second longer.
Okay.
As soon as
no
I've
worries.
got it going, I'll let you know. But don't hold up on my account.
Got it. Cool. I see Shia has the collection.
Hmm. Why can't I drag and drop that?
Oh, you're trying to drag the collection?
No, I was just trying to. I built it into a another collection I had just to expedite things, and I thought I could just drag and drop into a new collection, but it doesn't seem to want to do that.
You can do that.
Hmm.
Alejo,
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if we could, this is like unrelated to the lesson currently, but I was wondering if we could possibly do a lesson on deploying on Linux. I don't remember. I think we did one briefly in class with Corey, but I really don't remember it. And I know like 2 job applications that I applied for,
Mm-hmm.
they use Linux. They deploy on Linux. So
Okay. Yeah, I think we can definitely do that. But I guess like I'm a bit confused. Let me put this here. Let me take note of that. Because what do you mean deploying on Linux?
Like they
You mean maybe deploying? No, it's not the same as deploying to Heroku, right?
no.
Because I mean, Linux, for our purposes, Linux is not very different from Mac. So I'm not sure then I understand what you mean by deploying to Linux.
So if I read okay, it says you are familiar with deploying and operating services on Linux.
I see.
So I'm not sure what they meant by that because I use Heroku.
And this is from a job application?
Yeah, it's from the Spotify description. They're full stack engineer summary.
So what they mean by that, it really is that you know your basic commands in the terminal. That is Git, that is npm, that is the Heroku in the terminal, that is like ls cd cat, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's really what they mean by that. Deploying operating services on Linux. They're just saying we expect you to be comfortable in the terminal.
Oh, okay.
And be able to move yourself around it. Yeah. And for example, I feel like if you know how to deploy a Heroku app from the terminal, which is the way that we do it, then you know how to deploy. Is that Mac and Linux are not very different from the terminal perspective. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
And then also one more line.
Yeah.
They say you know how to write distributed, well-designed services in Java.
That is wait, and this is for full stack Spotify, you said?
Yeah.
I see. That is a bit too much from my perspective, because distributed services is like some buzzword that now is going around called serverless, which means you don't really have one backend, but you have many. You sort of break that backend into many small services. So you could have like your user authentication service, and that could run on a different servers or micro server, in some other place, and then you have your I don't know, your users service and your post service. So breaking is about breaking the sort of backend into independent services and have those distributed, maybe even across. It could even be across different clouds. Like you can have user authentication on AWS, and you could have your users or whatever other service on like, let's say like Google Cloud, for example. And doing that with Java is another programming language, different from JavaScript. So that feels like they're asking a bit too much there.
That's why I was confused, because like 2 lines down, it says you are experienced with modern React, JavaScript, CSS, HTML coding, testing, debugging, and automated, what does this say?
Test integrated or something like that.
Oh, automation techniques.
I see. And does this say if it's junior, senior, middle?
It says it's for students. So
it says students, yeah. I guess like I think
it was just weird to have like both words in the description. I was like, wait a second, because I know JavaScript, so it's like.
And I'm playing, but let me start from here again. So once you have a collection, you can just expand this here. And this gives you a few options to share, run, view in the web. That's a new thing. But if you click on share, then if you're working with a team and you are part of the same workspace, you could share it in that workspace and your teams will actually get updates live, I think, when requests change or when requests get added. You could also embed. Embed gives you this button that you could use in your READMEs for anyone that want to test out your API. In fact, I think I was looking at an assignment that I had made called the To-Dos API, which I think I did that for. Yeah, I embedded this. So for this, I have an entire collection of requests. And if I click run on NPM, then it's going to bump me into Postman. I think it's probably going to say that I already have it. Yeah. But you see that that is sort of importing that collection. And if I import, let's import as a copy, then I get that collection here, copy 15 requests. And then anyone could then try out all my requests. These are all the requests that I had in that collection. So let me delete that. The point is you can share. You could also, what? Delete. You could also run. If you click on run, that's gonna run all your requests in that collection sequentially. And that's it. We'll see how that could be helpful with the next thing that we'll learn. You can see that we're already 3:30. So we have half an hour. We may not cover everything, but you can just go on to the README and continue from there. The point is the collection is helpful for grouping related requests and sharing them. The other thing that that collection is going to let us is share information across requests with something called variables, and that's the next point. The next point is variables. So we could use variables in Postman. So for example, I can save the base URL, which is http://http://bean.org to a variable so that I don't have to type it again on my post request, or so that I don't have to type it again on that new request that I'm going to write later. So also, if for whatever reason my API URL change, then I just need to update it in one place instead of having to go on all my requests and change them manually to whatever the new URL is. So the way in which we can create a variable is actually pretty simple, and I discovered this yesterday. It's a new approach that I thought was simpler, so I wanted to show you that approach. You can just select any text from anywhere in your request, and sometimes it's like, no, doesn't work perfect, but you get this little pop-up set as variable. So what I want to do is I'm going to select this, select the pop-up to open, and then set as variable. And I'm going to say set a new variable. And then here I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call this variable called base URL. And then that's the value that's going to have, and the scope. So it turns out you can have global variables, environment variables, and collection variables. I linked to more as to why and how this could be helpful. For now, I'm just going to have this variable to be for the collection. So you just select collection for the scope, and then I click set variable. You're going to see something change here as I click set variable. Set variable, and then my URL field now changed to be curly bracket, base URL, close curly bracket. And if I hover over it, then I see that the value that it contains, which is HTTP bean and its scope as well. So this is, I just set that variable, and that variable now I could use anywhere in my request. So if I create a new request, let's say, a simple get, and now instead of typing HTTP bean, I could just say open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and say base URL, oops, lowercase actually. And you can even see that Postman will let you know if you're not using the right one because it says unresolved variable. If I do URL lowercase, oh, I guess it still says on the unresolved variable. That might be because I haven't saved it to the collection. Let me save this to the collection. Let's go save. Save. Oh yeah, so because that request was not saved, was not part of the collection yet, it didn't see the variable. But now we have it, and if I hover over it, I see it. And then let's say I want to make just a GET request, just like that. And I hit send. Now that went to http://bin.org, http://bin.org/get. So this is how then we can share information across variables without repetition. So now I'm going to go to my post and replace this piece here with curly bracket, base URL. And you can name your variables anything you want. And
Okay.
save that.
How do you edit a name?
Say that again?
How do you edit a name of a, not of a variable, but of a request that you save to your collection?
Oh yeah, you can double click here on this. This is the name. Oh, actually not click. I guess you have to press the pen. And in the pen, then you can change the name. When you hover over here at the top, there's this little pen. Click on it, and then that's going to let you change the title or the name of the request.
Okay.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah, because I was a little confused when we tried to do the GET request, and then but it didn't register because that GET request wasn't saved into the collection yet.
Mm-hmm. And I guess like the name that I used to save was like this, which probably just sort of to keep with the, by default, when you save, it will save with whatever you have in the URL. Just to keep it consistent, let me just add get. Hit enter. Let's close this. Yeah, and sometimes what I do like after the fact is like, you see how the name still has HTTP. So I'll just go in and change it here. But not super important. Or sometimes I even skip this altogether. Because I know that if this is my HTTP bin, then all my requests are going to that. Here, let's change this. Save that. Save this. Now here I have 3 requests now. Okay, so how do you set a request? How do you set a variable? Any value anywhere. You can double click it to select it or highlight it, and then set as variable. So what I want you to do, this is the exercise. What I want you to do, collections, we saw collections. That's a bit for the collection. So what I want you to do is to locate where the username SomeUser123 is used and make that a variable. Turn that into a variable called username. Actually, I guess I listed here where it is. So replace the instances where we said SomeUser123 with now the variable username. And that will be in the patch URL. We have SomeUser123, and in the post JSON body, we also have SomeUser123. So I want you to make SomeUser123 a variable with the name of username so that we can just reuse that throughout.
Okay.
So let's do 5 minutes for that.
Alejo,
Mhm.
I can't get that thing to pop up to set as variable.
Try double clicking. Sometimes double clicking brings it out. Double clicking the value will highlight it.
No, that's not
No.
working either.
But you did update, right?
Let
Postman.
me double check. Oh,
Maybe I think that might be a new feature.
okay. Oh, I had to restart Postman.
Okay, maybe after that I think it should work.
Sorry, I have an internet issue.
No problem. Okay, how did it go?
It went okay, but the way I target it, it seems to be just grabbing the word itself and not the quotation marks. So it's like I'm abstracting inside of quotes, which I don't know if that's working.
Yeah, so that one can be a bit tricky there. Okay. So let's see, where was it? The patch. So this one the patch you got to work well.
Actually, I was only really messing around with the post so far,
Okay.
because I had the username specifically in it.
I see. The way in which we will let's do it here. So I'm gonna double click some user and then set that as a variable. I'm gonna set a new variable. I call this variable username. And then the scope will be just the collection. Set variable. I don't know. Can you hear the kids upstairs? They're
A little bit,
they're running around. Some days they run more than other days. So I set that as that section there. Now if I save this, I just hit Command S to save, just like you would in code. In post, now my post body uses some user as well. So what I need to do here is replace that. I leave the quotes in there, but inside I put this. So because, yeah, the quotation will still need to be there. That was likely where you were, right?
Yeah. No, it does work. It all, yeah, so that's cool.
Awesome. Cool. So let's verify, let's send this post request. And let's see what we get in the JSON. There we go. We got some user 123. That is, at the moment I hit send, Postman reads the value of this variable and plugs it in here, which is some user 123. So in that way, then when we have now variables that we can use to share information across our requests. This can be helpful, for example, if in your application you need to log in the user before you can make a post, for example, you want to reuse that username and have it in a variable. Okay, does this make sense? Questions or thoughts? Okay, so these are variables. They let us share information across our request. If you want to change them, you can. I don't know if you can do that here. Oh no, you can here. I think that's a part that I might have left out of the README. But if you want to change them, all you could do is go to your collection here, and then click on these 3 dots, which gives you the options for the collection. And if we click edit, I think Asia, you mentioned this before, but like you weren't sure about what to do in these areas. But if we go on edit the collection, we see variables, then our variables are here. And we could also add more variables here, some other variable, and then we can give it an initial value. And it shows the current value and the initial value. I think the difference is that the current value is used while it's under the request, but they are never synced out with Postman. And yeah, if left untouched, the current value automatically assumes the initial value. And you can have as many variables as you can, as you need. Yeah. Cool. Just gonna hit cancel for that. But we could update the information there. So if this is like this will be helpful again, as I said in the beginning, because if I click edit again for the collection and variables, if my URL changed to now be example.com, I can just come here. And now my requests are going to go to example.com, which probably is not a valid API and the request will fail, but let's try it anyway. Let's try post, patch, send. We got some HTML, but the point is that if we look at code, probably we see that now our request is going to example.com. It's just that example.com does not understand anything that we're doing here. Let's click edit. Let's put back our original variable. HTTP. That, and let's just make sure that still works. Still works. Awesome. Okay, so those are collections and variables. Questions or thoughts?
This has helped out a lot. Thank you so much. I had been using, before this class, I had been using workspaces as collections, but now I feel I better understand. Would you recommend having because now I've got like a bunch of like workspaces I need to fix. Having like a public versus private workspaces and then doing all of your collections between those. But now like better understanding collections, I think, has really been a boon today though.
But what would you keep in the private workspace that's different from the public?
Yeah, and even just saying it now, it doesn't make sense. I feel like I've just been doing it wrong, and now I've got like all my work scattered across a bunch of very separate workspaces. So I think from here on out, I'm going to stick to one workspace, pushing forward. Yeah, one workspace and collections. I think you will have multiple workspaces when you're part of a team and you're literally working on the same workspace. And then maybe that team deals with different APIs, then you will have a collection per API, but all that information will be synced within the workspace. Gotcha.
Cool. Other questions or thoughts so far? Okay, let's take a look at what I had after that. After that is testing. I think this will be the last thing we'll cover. Yeah, and then dynamic variables we can skip, or I can mention it like briefly because is something with variables that we already explored, so it wouldn't be too bad. So writing tests, this is probably the biggest part and the one that we have the least amount of time to talk about. but I hope to just give you what's the right word? An appetizer, if you will, or there's another better word for that, but just a hint as to what it is. So it turns out that for a request, we could use Postman to test our backend, to automatically test our backend. I think, actually, I don't know if when you were talking about it earlier, you said automated test something from the job description, but
automation techniques.
Oh, just automation technique. Okay, I guess that's a bit more general, but this will be automated tests that will run to verify if we got what we expected, which could be helpful because in this way we could test our entire backend and see if everything is working. Testing your API can give you the confidence that your API is working as expected and help you verify that new developments have not broken any existing functionality. And you can do this with Postman. I had shown both classes a while ago how to do it with Jest and like sort of from writing JavaScript files, but you could also use Postman for it. And the framework of thinking is simple. You just send some data to the server, wait for the server to do some work with that data. And then once the server responds, you assert that the server responded with what you expected. And the test will execute after a response has been obtained. So how do we write a test? So for example, let's check that our post request went well, that it returned a 200. So to test a request, if we go back to Postman, I can click on tests, literally. And here in this Postman tab that we might not have used till today, you can write JavaScript. You can do console log hello. And this is cool because JavaScript is flexible and developers that maybe are not using JavaScript can use it here for testing their API. Or maybe some of them have to learn some of it. So the point is you can write almost any JavaScript here. It even has a small console. So if I run this, send, this icon here, the console, will pop up the console. And here is my hello. So I can run almost any JavaScript there. There are some limitations. So like you can't install an npm package and run it. It comes with some predefined npm packages. But let's go back to tests. But then there is a bunch of functionality you can use to test. So there is on this right side, there is a snippet section. I feel like I want to cough and I don't want to cough on you. In this snippet section, there are some examples. So for example, you can check like how to status code is 200, how to check if the status code is 200. If I click on that, then that writes a test for me that will check if the status is 200. So the way in which this works is similar to what we have done in the past. And I'm not sure we're going to write this one from scratch. So to write a test, we could just say PM. PM is a global variable that stands for Postman, that test. And then just like in other testing, the first argument is a description. I'm going to say request, or maybe server return 200 OK for login request. This can be anything, just a description for your test. And then the second argument is a callback. And then in the callback, then I can perform my test. So I'm going to see if the request body, if the request status was 200, if the code was 200. So to access the request here, I can do pm.request. Actually, I want response. Response. Actually, so what I would do is there's a few ways to do this, but the way that I would do it is pm that expect. And then I will say expect the response code to equal. Oh, also it has some nice autocomplete feature this here. So if you forget, like there is ways in which you can help out there because it has autocomplete enable. So PM expect the response code to equal 200. This is a simple test. This is just going to check if it returned 200. Now, if I hit send now, I get here this tab at the bottom, test results, and it says 1 of 1, server returned 200. That means my test pass. Let's make this test fail. Let's say expect this to return a 404. We know that it's not going to return a 404. It returns a 200. When I hit send, now my test has failed. Server returned 200 OK for login request, and the assertion was expected 200 to equal 404. So then my request failed there because sorry, not the request, the test that I had written. So in this way, then I can test if my request went well. This could be like, you expect your request to go well most of the time. And if a request goes wrong when you expected it to go well, then you will be aware that something happened. Maybe maybe you and a new commit introduce a bug that returns that makes your request fail. This will be our first very simple test. So the format is PM to access almost everything, PM test to write the test, PM expect to perform an assertion, and then you pass in what is the thing that you want to assert. In this case, is PM.response. That is a reference to the response that came back. That code to equal 200 is we expect that code to equal 200. Let's write another test. So let's do PM.test. Let's say login request returns username that just logged in, or that logged in. This, imagine the scenario where you have a login request and then you send your login request and the server says welcome whatever name. Like this is we're using our imagination here because this is not exactly what the server is doing, but we could still play with it. So let's imagine that we expect that when I send a login request, somewhere in the response, the logged in, somewhere in the request should have the same username that I sent, because, well, if I'm logging out this username, then that means that user is the one that's logged in. So what we could do is, let's first get the username. So in here, the username in the body, well, we're sending it through the variable. So we need to grab the variable now in our script. To get the variable in our script, I'm going to create a variable. You can create variables and you can do anything you can do in JavaScript. I'm going to call it let username equal PM that actually PM that collection variables that get and then the name of my variable, username. This gets my username variable from the collection. And then I want to say, okay, so I have that. I have the information that I wanted to compare it to. Now I'm going to say PM.expect. So, here's one step that I missed. Before we do that, I need to read the response that came back from the server. So I'm going to say let parse response or parse data. So I could console log PM.response. But But I think that is going to be a lot of stuff, and I don't think it's going to be. Let's try it. Let's take a look. I'm going to send this request, and then I'm going to open the console. Yeah, so this is the response, and it's just status. Okay, code headers. There's some header stuff there. There's some stream stuff here, but I don't see my data there. That is because my data is actually somewhere inside of here, somewhere inside of stream, but I need to parse that information. So the way in which we do that is we know that our server returned JSON. We can parse JSON if we say pm.response.json. This parses our data. So now if I say parse data, and I console log that, let's send that. Let's open the console. Now we see the parse data, which is exactly what we see in here. Yeah, let me close this. So this data here, this is the response data that we see sort of well formatted. That is like, actually that looks like this. That is just raw text. And then Postman just, when I click on pretty, it reads that JSON and it makes it look pretty. But in my test, what I want to do is I want to parse this JSON so that I can key into it. The way which we do that is just pm.response.json. And now if I go to my console, I see the same information. I see args, I see data, files, method, everything that I was seeing in here in my body. So now I can interact with that data from JavaScript. And then what I will do is, okay, so I have the parse data here, and I'm expecting that the request return somewhere the username. So in this case, I'm going to say pm.expect that parse data, which is that JSON that we got back, that JSON, which is this property here, that username, expect that to equal not username, which is this username that we got from the environment. Okay, I guess I could also hard code here some user 123, but since we know that we can get it from the environment, let's just use the environment variable username. Now, if I hit send, I have two tests passing: login request return username when logged in. But let's make it fail just so that we see it. Let's say it's expecting the username to be Alejo. Let's send that. Now we have one failing, saying expected some user to equal Alejo. That's because the server replied with the information that we just sent, which was some user, and we were expecting that to be Alejo, which will never be equal to. So I'm going to put back username here. So send that, then our tests are passing. This is a small example where basically you can send information to the server the way that we do it, and then with tests we can check if we get what we expected, if we got what we wanted. In this case, the example would be like you log in a user, you send some information to the server, and you're expecting the server to return that information back to you. And that's what we're doing here. For doing that, you need to parse the response into a JavaScript object. Because remember, when this body here, the way that it actually comes is it's just raw text, you know. It's just this raw text that then we want JavaScript to make this text an object so we can key into it and use it and modify it if we want to. And that's what this line does. This line takes that raw text and turns it into an object called parse data. And then we can key into that object, parse data.json, that username, and etc. So I know this was fast, and this was there's a lot here to unpack. Some of the functions you can use. Some of the functions you can use, there's PM test, PM expect, PM response to access the response, parsing the response, PM request to access anything in the request, PM collection variables to access, to get and set collection variables, and I linked here to a full reference of everything you can do. I wanted to do this exercise, which was sort of make for the patch, you write some tests to check that it returned 200 okay, test that the method, the response came back with that the method property of the response has patch, and checking that the data property of the response was empty. And just to wrap up here, you can write tests, as I said at the beginning, to ensure that your API is working as you expected. And Postman provides utility functions through PM.whatever to read the request response and to perform assertion on the data you get back. There's these other scripts here, test script examples. Those have some examples about other things you can do with the scripts, and a more sort of general on testing with Postman here. We'll leave here for today. Any questions or thoughts?
Is the PM test what throws that error that we were able to see in Postman, or is?
That's right. Yes. Once you have something here that throws, PM.expect throws, and then that is caught by PM.test, which then shows here.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Can you send the lesson?
The README link?
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you.
Also, I linked it into the calendar invite as well, but yes, I'm gonna share it here. Where did the chat go? That's another chat. Cool. Other questions or thoughts? Repeat that, Siham?
No, that's just my son was talking.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries. Okay. This was some tips and tricks in Postman. Oh, the last tip is this one. This is cool if you're sending, like, if you want to use random or dummy data. There are these variables called dynamic variables that you can use. So if you want to generate an ID, a random ID, you can just use the same syntax for variables, but now you will know that they're different because they start with a $sign. So let's just one example here that we can see. Let's say that the limit, let's say that I wanted my limit to be some random integer. So I could do $sign, sorry, curly bracket, and then a list pops up. These are all the dynamic variables you could use. And there's a ton of them. There is to a random color. Let's use that one, even though that one doesn't make sense for the limit, but let's still try it anyway. And I hit send. What was put there, we don't know, unless we look at the body that was sent back. Now we see here the limit that we used was green. That was, he selected a random color and then he put it there. If I click on in here, yeah, you can see now he changed it to Azure, Maybe every time I click on that, it's gonna pick a different one. Yeah, great. So these are dynamic variables that are pre-made in Postman that you can use to generate random data. Like they have a whole ton of them. I think, oh, I wanted the autocomplete again. I think they even have like random words, like random phone number. Let's try random words. Let's hit send. And then that limit receive these random words, synthesizing proactive, great quality invoice. So you could use this whenever, like for example, if you're testing your backend for creating posts and you don't want to think about what to write for the post text, you can use random words, for example, for that. Cool. Well, that wraps up the 4 tips and tricks that I wanted to talk about today. And if anything, just make you aware of them so that if you're interested, you can dig deeper. And also to hopefully make your Postman workflows a bit more organized and a bit more powerful for you and for your development. But that will be it for today. Any departing questions or thoughts?
So I managed to get the content done, but I realized that it wasn't exactly the same as what you had. I think yours is like 61.
Yes.
And yeah, what I got was 38.
Oh, but I think is that because you were trying the random words stuff
No, before.
before?
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's say 10 here. Send code. I'm getting 61 for the post request. Which one are you talking about? Post or the patch?
No, I think it was for the post.
Okay. For the post, I'm getting 61. When you inspect it, what did you get?
38.
And do you see the same data here?
Mm-hmm.
That is so strange.
I was wondering if it has anything to do with the fact that yours is you're using raw, and I was using the other
Oh.
XX for your code.
Okay. Yes. It definitely has to do with that. Yes. Because form URL encoded, everything is in one line and there's no spaces. So that makes sense. You get 30 something, right?
Yeah.
And this is like almost, let's say these 2 lines are almost the same. So it makes sense that yours is about half because everything is in one line. And then there's these spaces, the spaces are counting, the new lines are counting. So yeah, because let's take a look at it here.
You have the /n for the spaces, like down here in the data.
Where here?
No, down here where it says data, like all that
This.
space.
That's right. Yeah. So all of that is counting. All of that's counting toward my 61. But in yours, because it's form URL encoded, you only get the data. No, even you don't even have quotation marks. So all that is saving in roughly, I guess, half. But did you do anything different to get the content length to appear?
No, I did what you said, like kind of updating it and then restarting it again, and then sending the request.
Okay. Cool. Cool. All right. That is it. Any other questions, thoughts? All right. Well, thank you for coming. I hope this was insightful. I hope you will start using some of these tricks. And then I'll see you the next time. Cool.
Thank you again so much.
Have a good one. See you tomorrow. Ashia?
Thank you.
Cool. All right.